before you call me a monster and an animal for defending the situation, I will say this. The cop was following the procedure.
Never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
We all know that critical race theory is an absolute disaster for the future of our children. And the reason is because it's not really pure education. It's just complete indoctrination, sponsored and endorsed by the left, being rammed down the throats of our kids. It's statewide propaganda at best. There's no debate. It's a simple curriculum of telling our children exactly how they should think. That's why so many parents are so furious and frustrated with the entire critical race theory concept. There is no input from the parents. There's no deciding what parts of it we should embrace and what parts of it are total and utter garbage. It's just complete dictatorship from a statewide education level. And at first, we thought we weren't going to have a say in the matter. Well, a group called 1776 Activists is now fighting back and going up against the liberal left and the critical race theory concept. They've had enough. They've got New Hampshire legislators now on board to also fight back against this, and they want to now put back into effect a movement, a 1776 conservative education movement that Donald Trump started at the end of his presidency, and they're starting to gain momentum. So parents, don't worry. It's not all doom and gloom. We're not going to have BLM dictate the rest of our children's curricular life throughout their school. And if this group has anything to do with it, they're going to put a stop to it very quickly. Let's head over to Facebook today, where we start our show in discussing exactly what this new activist group is and how they plan on giving the decision back to the parents and bringing conservatism and patriotism back to the classroom. Let's take a look. So, a new activist group. And when I read this, I was thinking, thank God, because somebody needed to do something. What they're teaching in our children's classrooms or what they're about to start in teaching, I personally don't think is the best thing for our kids. Critical race theory. Before we get into this article, let me just kind of explain my thought process here. Critical race theory creates division. There's no going around it. It absolutely creates division in schools. And it's because race has become a political matter. There's a reason, a very good reason, why we do not teach politics in school. And I don't care what you have to say about the matter. Black Lives Matter, race is a very political issue today. And it's because our government, our very own government, decided to politicize it. The left have sponsored Black Lives Matter. The Democrats got involved in that movement. They practically funded the entire campaign. Therefore, it's a political matter. If the Democrats just kept their mouths shut, arrested people for burning, looting, and rioting, and stayed completely out of the George Floyd movement, parents would probably be embracing a little bit of critical race in the classroom. But that's not what happened. Democrats completely controlled the narrative, and they are now trying to get it pushed into school. So rightly so, parents are very skeptical. They're upset. They're furious by the fact that there's no balance. And ultimately, that's going to lead to further division amongst the classroom. Because at the end of the day, we are not educating our children with critical race theory. We're indoctrinating them. It is nothing more than statewide liberal propaganda being forced upon us by the left. So if there's no room in the classroom for politics, then there's no room in the classroom for critical race theory. Growing up myself, I was taught to treat your peers equal. And I'm still all for that. I will always be for that. We didn't need to bring race into treating everybody equal. But now we're teaching our kids how to look at black people, how to look at Asian people, how to look at Indian people, unnecessarily. We have brought race into a situation where race did not exist in the kindergarten classroom. Let's be honest. How many kindergartners walk around at that age racist towards their peers? But now they're being taught and forced how to look at certain minorities. So they're going to bring that conversation back home, where you have parents who are very much against bringing race or racism or politics into the classroom, and are now going to be countering the schools by telling their children the real deal. So it's going to create a great amount of division. And most conservatives know that, because while the liberals have been brainwashing our children with this whole indoctrinative movement of critical race theory, you have the patriots and the conservatives setting the record straight. Let's head over to Fox News and take a look at the article and find out which group is responsible for the 1776 activist movement that originally started with Donald Trump. So a new activism group is launching to counter ideas like critical race theory and pursue the type of educational vision outlined by former President Trump at the end of his term. If you guys remember, as soon as Trump got a hold of what the left were doing and how the schools were now embracing the BLM movement, which essentially you're embracing violence, you're embracing looting and stealing. So of course, as a parent, I'm not okay with that. And I don't want my children thinking that's okay with that. So I will tell them there was nothing peaceful about BLM, and I will continue to tell them that, while also telling my son to treat everybody fairly, all races. I'm not going to get into individual races. I'm not even going down that route with a 4-year-old, nor do I think our teachers should be. So a new activism group, a group inspired by Trump's 1776 commission. You guys remember that at the end of Trump's presidency, he started this commission. He started this commission, or he started this movement. So this new group, inspired by the Trump 1776 commission, seeks to combat anti-American indoctrination in education. This is what the right and the conservatives think about the entire left-wing critical race theory indoctrination program. They think it's anti-American. That alone right there should tell you we probably shouldn't be teaching this stuff in school. Whether you agree with the fact that critical race theory is anti-American or not is neither here or there. Anybody who supports critical race theory is already doomed for failure. The system, the education system, the public school system is doomed for failure, because you have too many people now, whether you sit on the right or the left. There may be some Democrats who think critical race theory is anti-American. You have too many people in this country who think critical race theory is an anti-American concept. So right there, regardless of what the schools think, they failed. The curriculum will absolutely fail in school. Immediately, they should be pulling the plug on this. So let's head over and take a look at the article and break it down even further as to why I believe this entire thing is an absolute disaster and needs to be shut down before it even starts. So a new activism group is launching to counter ideas like critical race theory and pursue the type of educational vision outlined by former President Trump. Now, again, regardless of what you think about Trump's version of education, the point here is conservatism, patriotism, what it's like to be a true American has all been lost in the American classroom. So the group known as 1776 Action is rolling out a series of efforts this week to support, and this is
a real B&H customer
that
story.
New Hampshire has already gone down the route of considering banning this type of theory in the classroom. So the 1776 Action Group is rolling out a new series of efforts this week to support New Hampshire's legislation banning critical race theory. So we've already got states now jumping on the bandwagon. They don't think it's right. They're not going to be hijacked by the liberal left or the far left, radical left at this point. They want nothing to do with it. They're going to put their foot down. Adam Waldeck, the group's president, so Adam Waldeck is this 1776 activism group's president, and he told Fox the other night that his group plans to also be active in Loudoun County, Virginia, which has seen a clash between disgruntled parents and schools pursuing the controversial ideology. So already we have states stepping up and fighting back at this. We have activist groups stepping up and fighting against this. We're only going to see many more over the next few months. And remember, most of the United States, the children aren't even back into person yet. They've been doing this hybrid stuff. So they haven't really had much of an education this past year. So parents haven't really needed to think about it. The real damage hasn't even remotely begun yet, because schools are still trying to figure out how to get the kids back into class, let alone begin their far left radical ideology of critical race theory. So it hasn't even begun yet, and we already have pushback from the states. So again, that alone right there tells me that we are going to see a lot more pushback. So last month, this group, 1776 Activist or Action Group, they launched just last month as a tax-exempt organization. The arguments are growing resistance to diversity trainings and curricula in U.S. institutions. Like Parents Defending Education, which Fox News reported, 1776 Action intends to empower parents to challenge these ideas at the local level. And that's the biggest argument right now. The fact that parents have never even had a say. They've never even been able to have their input in this situation. And that's been the biggest frustration for me. Nobody has asked us what we thought about the situation. Because as far as I'm concerned, my kid is going to school to learn how to read, write, arithmetic, a little bit of history. You want to teach a little history in the classroom. And history is not BLM last month. That's not history to me. Okay, that might be history in 20, 30 years when we've collectively decided as a nation whether teaching the fact that people rioted and looted and burned down America to get their way is appropriate for the classroom. I'm not convinced or sold yet that it is, but maybe it will be. After all, we have monuments of public figures from hundreds of years ago who were slave leaders, and we teach that. Is it appropriate today? I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe we need to eliminate some of this from the classroom. Personally, I'm a big fan of history, and I think that we should be teaching all forms of history. Martin Luther King, back to slave trade, back to Abraham Lincoln abolishing slavery, and the course or the direction and the path that it put America on since. But omitting history, eliminating history, rewriting history to suit your left-wing narrative is completely unacceptable. And it sends the wrong message to these children. Like I said in the beginning of the show, I'm all for equality. I'm all for teaching our children how to be fair, how to love one another, how to be kind. I don't think there's any room in school for bullying. And I think these matters should be taken very seriously. After all, bullying children their entire life is what leading to a lot of the mental illnesses that are ultimately responsible for a lot of the mass gun shootings. So if anything, we need to focus on a little less bullying or a lot more of teaching kids on how to treat each other fairly, all races, instead of pinpointing specific races, which can lead to further issues in the classroom. because of the division that it's creating. So the article goes on to say a pledge on the group's website, and we'll get into the website in just a little bit. I'll tell you guys how you can find this organization in just a minute, but a pledge on the group's website asks citizens to commit to replacing elected officials, school board members, education commissioners, principals, deans, and university presidents who promote a false, divisive, and radical view of America and our fellow citizens with new leaders who respect our history, our values, our rights, and the God-given dignity of every person. So I love this. This group is exactly right. And if you're in any of the education groups on Facebook, whether on a local level or a national level, they all keep saying the same thing. It's time that we get rid of these elected officials who are pushing a far left agenda and are ramming these critical race theory ideologies down our children's throats. So we have the power. We can re-elect government officials, school board members, education commissioners, deans, university presidents. Get rid of all of them who promote a false, divisive, and radical view of America and our fellow citizens with new leaders who respect our history, our values, our rights, and the God-given dignity of every person. Enough singling out races, enough singling out minorities. We don't want to hear it. I'm done with it. I don't want my children even growing up around it. For Christ's sake, our kids, at least those who are young, 20 years from now, does racism even still need to be a thing in America? No. But it will be if we don't shut the hell up about it. I've always been a big advocate for decades now, for years now, not just because of what's happened last year with Black Lives Matter, but I've always been an advocate of if we stop talking about it, if we stop highlighting it, if the media stops ramming it in our faces, maybe racism will finally slowly start to die away. It's always been the way I've thought about racism. So in signing a pledge specific to New Hampshire, so they're trying this out in New Hampshire, in signing a pledge specific to New Hampshire, activists will be directed to contact their House members. Waldeck, the group's president, intends to create a way for parents around the country to track how school board candidates rate on these issues. And I think this is great. We're now able to allow parents to track how these certain ideologies are perceived in their communities, which to this point we've had absolutely no say in, which has been utter and total bullshit at best. We've had no say in how they plan on indoctrinating our children. We have no say in how these kids are going to go through school now, being taught a curriculum that could go against them. This hasn't been tested. It hasn't been piloted. They want to move 1,000 miles at this situation without any input from the children. So I think it's great that they're trying this out in New Hampshire and that parents will now have a way to track how school board candidates rate on these issues. We need to start holding our school board members accountable, because look what's happened in California. Look what's happened in New York. Look what's happened in other Democrat-run states. These kids have been out of school. They haven't had the opportunity of in-person learning. And our school board members have a lot to do with this. So we need to get rid of the ones who aren't allowing input from the parents, who feel like railroading our children's education system with far left radical progressive ideas. And we also need to get rid of the ones who are staying silent on the issue. Just like Biden said, if you stay silent on racism, you're part of the problem. Well, I'm going to say the same thing to our Board of Education members. you stay silent and you don't fight against this, even though I know you're a conservative, you're part of the problem. Now, there's some very fine Board of Education members out there who I do feel are being hijacked and held hostage from a very far left liberal teachers union association. So they're feeling the pressure, but these people, they do need to fight back now because the parents are frustrated and they've had enough. So the 1776 activist group who are now fighting to counter critical race theory will now hold ad campaigns. So they're going to start promoting themselves too. 1776 activists are going to start advertising. They're going to start throwing this back in the public's face. And they're going to start countering everything that the left have tried to do. They're going to be countering this propaganda. So this week's ad campaign will include radio and digital elements, including emails with messages from former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, which I think is great. I think it's great that he's now getting involved, whom Waldeck previously served as an advisor, and former Housing and Urban and Development Secretary Ben Carson. Perfect. So we've got Ben Carson, who we all know is black. So I love that Ben Carson has now stood up against critical race theory. And I think it's important for us to mention the fact that not all black people support this very tyrannical and aggressive and abusive Black Lives Matter group. Now, I can't speak on behalf of Ben Carson because I don't know his perception on it. But I do know that a tremendous amount of black people, including public figure Candace Owens, wants nothing to do with Black Lives Matter and think they should be nowhere near our schools. And we don't care what our teachers think about Black Lives Matter. It's not for them to discuss in the classroom, just the same as it's not for them to discuss what party they support or what president they support. And they have treaded very dangerously on the line of politics in the classroom lately. Teachers have voiced their detest towards President Trump. That's grounds for dismissal. Why aren't these teachers being fired? We know it's in their contract. They're not allowed to bring politics into the classroom, just the same as law enforcement are not allowed to wear any political memorabilia on their uniforms. It's against the rules and regulations of the workplace. Yet teachers, for some reason, have been allowed to get away with it. So it's good to see now that we have people like Ben Carson, Newt Gingrich, stepping up and standing up to this. When I was asked to serve on President Trump's 1776 commission to help restore truthful, patriotic education, I was full of hope, reads an email signed by Carson. Then it was canceled by President Biden on day one. So Biden comes on the scene. He starts signing all these executive orders. And Biden actually canceled or came out with an executive order that banned Trump's 1776 commission that was full of truthful and patriotic education. So Ben Carson himself was very excited about Trump's 1776 commission. Biden comes on board and he wipes it out with a stroke of a pen. Not only wipes it out, but says, this is banned. We're not going down this route. First of all, who the hell is Biden to tell us what we're allowed to teach our children? Who the hell is Joe Biden to tell us that we're not allowed to teach patriotic and American history in the classroom? He's a nobody. I don't care if he's the president of the United States. It's not up to Joe Biden to dictate what our children learn in the classroom. And I think the parents need to start fighting back with people like Ben Carson, with Newt Gingrich, in this fight to counter critical race theory. Because critical race theory, like I said in the beginning of the show, has replaced critical thinking. Critical thinking in the classroom is no longer allowed because these liberal teachers are being bullies and are brainwashing these kids to begin with. When I grew up, you were supposed to be critically thinking. You were supposed to challenge the teachers. They taught you to challenge, to question, to debate. Today, you're not allowed to raise a peep against Black Lives Matter in the classroom without being sent to the principal's office. So critical race theory, as far as I'm concerned, is very dangerous. It's very draconian. It's very one-sided. And if teachers and the state curriculum, or whoever writes the curriculum, aren't careful, they're going to see a lot of pushback to the point where it may even turn violent, both in the classroom and amongst the communities, because they are creating further division. So there's no balance, which is the real issue I find with critical race theory. If there was a balance between critical race theory and Trump's 1776 commission, then I'd be all for it. But the fact that Biden came in on day one and said, we're going to ram critical race theory down your kid's throat with zero mention of true American history, that's where I have a problem. And I think that's where many parents have a problem. The fact that there's no balance here. I would be all for critical race theory as long as we were able to also teach 1776 patriotic commission type structures like Trump wanted to roll out. But the second that they banned one and allowed the other, they made it political, because that is not a true representation of America's history. Black Lives Matter is the furthest thing from America's history. That was a blip of violence on the grand spectrum. If anything, I don't even know why we're even discussing it in the classroom. And I think more parents are starting to wake up to it and become aware of how dangerous critical race theory really is for the classroom. So Ben Carson was full of hope. He was pleased by the situation and very disappointed once Biden came and wiped out the entire situation. He goes on to say, a setback for sure, but thankfully our solutions are much closer to home than Washington, D.C. The real power for positive, lasting change is in the hands of the parents and other concerned citizens. If only we're willing to put in the effort this truly deserves. So parents, Ben Carson has given us his blessing. It's up to you to fight against the insanity of what the left want to now indoctrinate our children with. But only if we're willing to put in the effort this truly deserves. Our politicians can't do it on their own. Ted Cruz, Ben Carson, Newt Gingrich, they cannot do it on their own. Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro. Parents need to take matters into their own hands and start fighting back. You can't bitch about it on the sidelines and then not fight back because you're worried about what your family or friends are going to think. You need to get out there, raise your voice against the insanity. Because by not doing this, we are getting railroaded and bulldozered over by the left on a daily basis. Just because Trump's no longer there to protect the conservatives, which it never should have been down to one man, just because he's no longer there doesn't mean we can't continue our fight. So we need to step up. Ben Carson is telling us, step up. Go up against the tyranny. Go up against the Board of Education members, the presidents of the universities, your elected officials. Get rid of them, replace them. New Hampshire lawmakers are taking a stance. So we will see more activist groups, but it can't just be down to them. It needs to be up to the parents as well. Since Trump's various actions on the issue, states like Florida, West Virginia have also started pursuing ways to halt critical race theory in its tracks. And you better believe Governor DeSantis, he's on it, because he's already getting rid of the vaccine passport. He's banning that in Florida. He's deemed it unconstitutional and unlawful. So we're now seeing states like Florida and West Virginia also pursue ways to halt critical race theory and stop it dead in its tracks. New Hampshire's legislation specifically prohibits state agencies and contractors from promoting what it calls divisive concepts. Exactly how I started the show today. It's divisive. Why is it divisive? Because politics is divisive. And there's no room for politics in the classroom, just like there's no room for critical race theory in the classroom. If you're not going to allow Trump's 7076 commission in the classroom, you're not going to allow critical race theory. You cannot have it one way or the other. You have to allow both. And if you're not going to allow both, then we're going to scream from the rooftops to shut the whole damn thing down. And it's already what conservative states have started doing. And you know what? If liberal states don't follow, if Democratic deep blue states don't follow, or at least allow both sides of the stories to be taught, we're gone. Conservatives are going to be, they're already exiting at record-breaking pace. And they'll continue to do so, leaving Democratic states to have to deal with the damage, high taxes, far-left radical ideologies. And I know not every one of my Democratic friends signed up for this. The majority of Democrats are moderates. We thought Joe Biden was a moderate. He's not. He's a far-left radical, or at least he's being influenced by the far-left radicals like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi have all been hijacked by the far-left radical progressives. And the moderate Democrats are sitting here thinking, we didn't sign up for this. We've already seen politicians. Just the last week, Las Vegas Mayor Lee has switched over to the Republicans. He said, this is not what I signed up for as a Democrat. I am officially switching my party affiliation over to Republicans. So it didn't take long. Biden's only been in office for 4 months now. Yes, it hurt not having Trump there and his voice throughout social media that kept this country on track. So we've been railroaded. We've been blindsided by these far-left radical concepts, initiatives. But now we've seen one by one more and more conservatives finally step up. Ted Cruz, Newt Gingrich, Josh Hawley, and a handful of others, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are going to continue to do Trump's work, who are going to continue to fight against this liberal insanity. So it's great to see that New Hampshire's legislation is specifically prohibits state agencies and contractors from promoting what it calls divisive concepts about race and sex. So you're no longer allowed to teach race in the classrooms in New Hampshire. They banned it. The legislation passed the state's House of Representatives on Wednesday. Good for them. Good for them. It's great to see that they've slammed the door shut on this nonsense. And we're going to hopefully see it from Florida, from West Virginia, and other patriotic conservative states. And no, before you play the race card, which you better believe we're going to start to see on CNN, I could pretty much write the articles. CNN is now going to label Florida racist, West Virginia racist, New Hampshire racist. Now, they're not racist. They're just putting their foot down on promoting a far-left radical ideology without being able to back that up with patriotic and American history as well. So if you're not going to teach both New Hampshire, West Virginia, Florida, they're saying you're not going to teach any of it at all. I would never expect that out of the deep blue liberal hellhole that I live in New York State, which is exactly what it is right now. I've never expect that out of Cuomo because we got AOC running the show right here in New York. And for some reason, New York is not just a moderate Democratic state anymore. It is a far left radical state, same as California. Far left radical state. And isn't it funny how the most far left radical states in the United States are run by who? New York Schumer, California Pelosi. You couldn't get any more far left than that. So we have a huge problem And something even more alarming than that is going on right here in Rochester, New York. Right here in my very own Rochester, New York, public schools near Rochester, according to the Daily Wire. This is where things get extremely dangerous and disgusting. Public schools near Rochester mandate anti-racist curriculum overseen by BLM. So now Black Lives Matter is calling the shots right here in Rochester, New York. Public schools near Rochester mandate anti-racist curriculum overseen by BLM leader who said, "I don't care if the whole city burned down." So we now have extremists. These are not protesters. These are not social justice seekers. These are extremists. Black Lives Matter leader who said, "I don't care if the whole city burns down," is now overseeing our anti-racist curriculum in Rochester, New York. This is disgusting and laughable, to be honest, that any parent could support such nonsense. So the article goes on to say, a public school district near Rochester, New York, informed parents, so it's already being rolled out. A public school district near Rochester, New York, informed parents this week that their children will be participating in new anti-racist curriculum that was overseen in part by a local Black Lives Matter leader who made headlines last summer when she declared, "I don't care if the whole city burned down" during unrest in Rochester. So it's okay to talk like that now. It's okay to incite violence, but only from the left. Clearly, if you're a conservative, you're an extremist for talking like that. You'll go to prison. The FBI will come to your house and hunt you down if you speak like that publicly. But according to the left, it's okay. It is absolutely okay to threaten the public that you are going to burn the whole city down if you don't get your way. So this is going on. West Irondequoit Central School District emailed the parents of 4th and 8th grade students about a new learning opportunity. I love how they call it an opportunity. This is far from an opportunity. This is propaganda that they're brainwashing both the parents and students into thinking it's called opportunity, in which your child will be engaging this spring. So welcome back to the classroom, kids. We're now going to teach Black Lives Matter, centering around the contemporary realities of structural racism. I'll tell you right now, if my kid, or if they're still teaching this shit, when my kid gets to 3rd, 4th grade, we wouldn't be here. There is no way I'm subjecting my son to this nonsense. The lesson plan caused consternation among some who claimed that parents were not given a chance to voice their opinion. Obviously, no parent's been given a chance to voice their opinion against the ideas in the curriculum, or even simply opt out. I would opt out. I'd say, no, I don't want my son. I'd say, okay, where's the part where we teach patriotism and conservative values? Where's that class? Can I see that class? Oh, you don't have that class. Of course you don't. So yeah, my kid will not be participating in this BS. The curriculum explores the history of racism and civil rights in Rochester, such as redefining in Monroe County, but it also appears to focus heavily on present-day structural racism and aims to give students an opportunity to build a more just and equitable community, which if you've heard my lives on equity, you'll know where I stand on that. Equity is a farce. It is a fallacy. It's misleading to the kids. It teaches your children that we're all going to get great jobs, that we're all going to get first place in life. It teaches your children that it's okay to show up no matter how well you do, and you're still going to get a participation trophy. That's all that equity means. That's not the real world, folks. Equity is total bullshit. And no, I don't want my son learning about equity in school. I want my son learning that you fight to win first place. But somewhere along the lines, equity is held both America, European countries hostage. They don't teach equity in Asia. they would laugh at this nonsense, and they are laughing at this nonsense. So while Americans become dumber and lazier, Asian kids are going to continue to excel in life and take all of our jobs. Well, my kid will have nothing to do with it. And anybody who wants their kid to excel, I would strongly recommend to those parents to tell their kids that equity is nonsense, because that is exactly what I will be teaching my kid. So the parents have had absolutely no say in Monroe County in Rochester, New York, as Black Lives Matter leader is now controlling the curriculum. This really has gotten that out of control in far left liberal states, which is exactly what New York and California are. So the school district, they try to justify it and assure parents in its email that the lesson plan contains age-appropriate materials and experiences. What experiences are you guys going to teach? Like, here's when they burned down these buildings. Here's when they shot the security guard point blank in broad daylight and left them there on the ground to die. Is that the experiences we're going to be teach? Here's what happens when the black community doesn't get their way. They burn shit to the ground. That's what we're going to be teaching? Because that's all that I saw over the summer. At least that's all the media showed us. Their real cause completely got derailed by violence. So it's a very confusing message. So no, I don't buy into this. I think what you're trying to do is justify violence. You're trying to justify the actions and erase and omit the truth behind the Black Lives Matter organization. Critical race theory is not an unbiased concept. It's very biased, and it's sending the wrong message to our children, and I don't think it has any room in school. Let's head over to the Keyboard Warrior Cam and see what the American people have to say about this, because I can't be the only one who applauds the 1776 activist group, and I can't be the only one who's a little bit disgruntled and upset over the fact that critical race theory is now going to be a thing in our schools, unless parents stand up to it. Smith says, I guarantee you most educators will support this. Teachers are remaining silent to avoid conflict at their workplace. School boards are just community members who also don't want conflict. So everyone remains silent and goes along with a few loudmouthed social warriors. The students just want to be with their friends and enjoy school activities. History is not a favorite subject for a 1st through 12th grade student, so they are not really involved in the topic. Adults love to project their own agendas onto their children, but most kids really don't care. Ask any teenager in your family. Smith's absolutely right. And that's what the liberal left are doing. Democratic liberal teachers are projecting their own personal agenda onto these students. That's all you guys are doing with your critical race theory. You're not teaching them anything. You think they're going to, like, they didn't give a shit about social studies. They're definitely not going to care about Black Lives Matter. They didn't care when it was going on, and they certainly aren't going to care in the classroom. They barely can get through a history class without falling asleep. So who is this really for? What's critical race theory? Who is this really for? Is it really for our children? Or is it statewide propaganda that, of course, Democratic teachers are jumping on board because their far left liberal viewpoints get to finally be heard through teaching it in the classroom? That's what's really going on here. And when these kids graduate, the only thing they're going to take away from this critical race theory is that the world is a freaking racist place. That's really what we're teaching in the classroom, that America is racist. Okay, we already know that. Why do we need to teach it? Why do we need to bang on about it over and over in the classroom? Why don't we start teaching equality again? which is what I learned growing up. Just teach everybody to be fair, because I don't care what happened in the 1960s, and my son, who's 4 years old, certainly doesn't care. All he cares about is that we get along with each other, that we treat each other fairly. That's all he's going to care about. And that's all I think we personally should be teaching. But he's going to get a very different perspective of the world if we keep teaching racism that doesn't need to exist, or doesn't exist most of the time until the media gets a hold of it. And let's be honest, does racism really exist in all parts of the country? No. I don't care if it exists in certain parts. If it doesn't exist in my area, why are we talking about it? That community can help itself, instead of brainwashing children around America for them to think that racism exists everywhere. Because it doesn't exist everywhere. It exists in some places, in some pockets, some cities worse than others. But constantly bringing it up, constantly reminding them in school is just going to make matter worse. It's only going to delay the inevitable. At some point, we're all going to come to head with each other before it gets better. If we don't just let it go. Because before Black Lives Matter, how many of you got in fights with your black friends? I never got in a fight with a black friend, ever. Now, half of my black friends have left my social media platforms. They've unfriended me. They're gone. Great friends that I grew up with won't even talk to me anymore. Because I think BLM is a joke. I love the black community, but I think Black Lives Matter as an organization was a total shit show and a monumental failure. Jack Weir says, inspired by those who propagate the big lie. It's like the flu. It will go away by April 3rd. Won by a landslide. Here, Trump gave us the sickest, most corrupt presidency in American history. Now his followers only hope it is to whitewash history. Jack's confused. He is right. The whole thing's been a big lie. He's obviously being sarcastic. And this is how most liberals think. Inspired by those who propagate the big lie. So he's referring to the 1776 activist group. No, it's not a lie, Jack. History has been written for us to follow. It's very clear what happened. There's nothing about history. I mean, yes, we may have skewed some things, but it doesn't take a historian to get to the bottom of what's actually accurate and what's not. So he's claiming here that 1776 activists are out to lie about history. No, we're not. We're only out to counter liberalism. We just don't want patriotism and conservatism to die, which is what Jack here fails to understand. He brings in Trump to the situation. He brings in the whole won by a landslide situation. Jack's just a typical leftist who can't get through a debate without bringing Trump into the mix. This has nothing to do with Trump anymore. This 1776 activist group is just all about teaching patriotism and conservatism in the classroom if you're going to allow racial critical theory or race critical theory. Catherine says 1776 action should be treated as a hate group that attacks our history as a nation of diversity. We are no longer following a taught history written with many, many untruths. A lot of trolls on this page today. Why should they be taught as a hate group? Everybody was okay with it being taught all these years. Look at these parents or these people who are slamming this 1776 group. Where was all the hate 10 years ago? Where was all the hate when you were growing up? You didn't hate the Pledge of Allegiance then, but all of a sudden today, you don't think we should be doing the Pledge of Allegiance in school. Why? Because CNN told you to. CNN told you that the Orange Man was bad. CNN told you that what you learned in school is no longer accurate. So naturally, a lot of these leftists are taking their cues from CNN without really doing their own research. Well, if you watch a few documentaries, you could piece this whole thing together without CNN telling you what's right and what's wrong. So when I see comments like this, when I see people commenting that 1776 action should be treated as a hate group, I have to come to the conclusion that this person has no idea what they're talking about and they've only taken their cues from the likes of CNN. Because they're not a hate group. They just want to counter this with patriotism. Is Ben Carson part of your hate group, Catherine? Because Ben Carson is 100% in support of 7076 action. Is Governor DeSantis part of a hate group? Newt Gingrich, Candace Owens? You mean to tell me all these people are part of hate groups? You mean to tell me that every single one of my black friends who supports patriotism, that they're part of a hate group? I find that very hard to believe. So Catherine clearly doesn't know what she's talking about, and she takes her cue from CNN. Mo says people need to start investing in their children at the grade school level and send them to private non-union teacher schools, our neighbor home school co-ops or neighborhood home school co-ops. They do. And I think more people are going to start to take or put their kids in these private schools. I don't think that they're going to allow their kids to be brainwashed in the public school sector. Personally, it's something that I'm thinking of myself as we get ready for our kid to go to school. Robin says, what is all this nonsense that the schools are indoctrinating people to leftist ideals? Did you consider the people who attend school are learning to think and are exposed to other points of view and might just believe in equality and the promise in the Constitution of freedom for all? No one wants socialism. The Dems want the government to work for all the people. The Republicans practice corporate socialism with tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations. There's a lot of people who are clearly confused on this thread because she seemed to have got it reversed. The Dems are the ones who are taking us down a socialist agenda with higher taxes, with free money for all, that higher taxes are going to have to pay for. So this thread today is clearly full of people who are very confused. It is total nonsense that we want to indoctrinate our children with leftist ideals. Robin claims to say that the Dems want the government to work for all the people. Yeah, at the sacrifice of the small businesses, at the sacrifice of the most important sector in the country, which are entrepreneurs who are now getting slammed with higher taxes. That is not a democracy. That is hijacking the hardest working individuals in the country now, raising their taxes so you can give to the poor people. That's not democracy, Robin. That's socialism. And I'd love to debate somebody like Robin on this because I'd probably destroy her because of how confused she is. Nobody wants socialism, Robin. You're right. Which is why we need to get rid of this garbage that's being taught in school, which is why we need to get rid of stimulus checks, Obamacare, demanding and forcing that companies raise their minimum wage, which is only going to eliminate more of the workforce, getting rid of COVID bonus pays, getting rid of people being able to rent for free, screwing the landlord. That is all socialism. So Robin's clearly confused. She's got it all wrong. She's claiming Republicans practice corporate socialism with tax cuts for the wealthy. No. Tax cuts for businesses promote economic growth. Because when you cut taxes, I now have more money as an entrepreneur to hire people, to invest in the growth of my business, what ultimately means more jobs. So I'm guessing Robin is your typical 9-to-5 worker bee who goes to work, collects her paycheck, wants everything for free in life, and complains about going into the office because of the pandemic. Robin, you are the very definition of socialism. Gary says we need to get back to the basics with our children, students. When schools do get back to full time, we need to test students to see where they are and then go from there. The school system as we know it may have to be pushed to one side and something new in its place. It's about the children, not us. And he's absolutely right. Critical race theory is not for the children. It's statewide propaganda that the liberals are jumping on board and sprinting at 1,000 miles per hour with because they feel the need to project their own personal liberal agenda now onto our children. And that is why I am 100% against critical race theory, because we're not allowing our children the opportunity to learn both sides. And I think it's great that we're showing, or that these activist groups, 1776 activists, have now come online to fight against critical race theory. I think it's great that Governor DeSantis in Florida, that New Hampshire legislators, that Newt Gingrich, that Ben Carson are now all joining the fight against this liberal nonsense. At some point, somebody had to. Democrats, did you really think we were going to sit the sidelines and just take this in the butt? Of course not. We're fighting back now. And we're going to continue to fight back for as long as you continue to push the left narrative agenda down our kids' throats. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here today at You Made It Political. It's Friday. Go out, enjoy your weekend. We'll be back every day at 10 a.m., our new time, live stream to Facebook and YouTube. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out YouMadeItPolitical.com.